Marcus Chen walked through the busy streets of London with his phone in one hand and his girlfriend Sarah holding the other. The morning sun was bright, and the air was cold. Marcus had been planning this trip for months. He wanted to see all the famous places in London and take lots of photos for his social media accounts. They reached Buckingham Palace, and Marcus stopped walking. His eyes went wide as he saw the big, beautiful building with its golden gates. There were hundreds of tourists everywhere taking pictures and talking loudly. But what caught Marcus' attention the most were the royal guards standing perfectly still like statues. Marcus had seen these guards in movies and pictures before, but seeing them in real life was different. They wore bright red jackets with shiny gold buttons. Their black hats were so tall they looked funny. The guards held big black guns and stood without moving at all. Their faces showed no feelings. They looked straight ahead and never blinked. Sarah wanted to take some normal tourist photos, but Marcus had different ideas. He was always the type of person who liked to be the center of attention. Back home in California, he was known for making people laugh with his silly jokes and crazy dance moves. His social media followers loved watching him do funny things in different places. Marcus pulled out his phone and started recording a video. He pointed the camera at himself and then at the nearest royal guard. The guard was a young man who looked serious and strong. Marcus started talking to his phone camera. "Hello everyone, this is Marcus Live from London. And look at these funny soldiers. They look like toy soldiers from a kid's movie. Watch this, I am going to make them laugh." Marcus put his phone on live stream so all his followers could watch what he was doing. Within minutes, dozens of people were watching and sending laughing emojis in the comments. This made Marcus feel excited and want to do more. He started making funny faces at the guard. Marcus pulled his cheeks wide with his fingers and stuck out his tongue. The guard did not move or change his expression at all. Marcus tried again, making even sillier faces. He jumped up and down and waved his arms like a crazy person. Sarah felt embarrassed and tried to pull Marcus away. "Marcus, stop it," she said quietly. "You are making us look bad. People are staring at us." But Marcus was having too much fun. More tourists had started gathering around to watch what he was doing. Some of them were laughing and taking their own videos. Others looked uncomfortable, but Marcus did not notice them. Marcus decided to make his performance bigger and better. He started doing silly dance moves right in front of the guard. He did the chicken dance and then pretended to be a robot. His phone showed that more than 100 people were now watching his live stream. "Look at this guy," Marcus said to his camera while pointing at the guard. "He is like a statue. I bet he cannot even see me. Maybe he is not even real. Maybe he is just a fake person made of plastic." The crowd around Marcus grew bigger. Children started laughing and pointing. Their parents took photos with their phones. Marcus felt like he was the star of his own show. He had never gotten this much attention before. But as Marcus continued his silly performance, something strange happened. For just 1 second, he looked directly into the guard's eyes. The guard was still looking straight ahead and had not moved his body at all. But Marcus could swear he saw something in those eyes, something that was not amusement or confusion. It was something that made Marcus feel cold inside, even though the sun was shining bright. But the feeling only lasted a second, and then it was gone. Marcus shook his head and continued his show thinking he had just imagined it. Marcus looked at his phone screen and saw the numbers going up fast. More and more people were joining his live stream. The comments were coming in so quickly he could barely read them. People were sending laughing faces and fire emojis. Some were writing things like "This is so funny" and "Keep going, dude." The attention made Marcus feel powerful and excited. He had never had so many people watching him at the same time. Back in California, his videos usually got only 20 or 30 views. But here in London, he was getting hundreds of viewers in just a few minutes. Sarah tried one more time to stop him. "Marcus, please," she whispered, pulling on his arm. "This is not right. We should just take normal pictures and leave." But Marcus pushed her hand away gently. "Relax, Sarah," he said with a big smile. "Everyone is having fun. Look at all these people laughing. I am making their day better. Marcus decided it was time to take his performance to the next level. He started walking closer to the royal guard, but stayed outside the rope that separated tourists from the guards area. He was now close enough to see the guard's face very clearly. The guard looked young, maybe in his 20s. He had bright blue eyes and light brown hair that was perfectly neat under his tall black hat. His skin looked smooth, but there were small lines around his eyes that made him look older than he probably was. Marcus started making jokes about the Queen and the royal family. He put on a fake British accent that sounded terrible and made the crowd laugh even more. He pretended to drink tea with his pinky finger up and said things like "cheerio old chap" in his bad accent. The guard did not react to any of this. He kept looking straight ahead like Marcus was not even there. This made Marcus want to try even harder to get some kind of reaction. Marcus began pretending to march like a soldier. He lifted his knees high and swung his arms back and forth. He tried to copy the way he thought British soldiers walked. The crowd loved this and started clapping and cheering. More tourists stopped to watch the show. Parents lifted their small children on their shoulders so they could see better. Teenagers took videos with their phones. Even some adults who looked serious at first started smiling and laughing. But not everyone was enjoying the show. An old woman with gray hair and a fancy coat was standing at the back of the crowd. She was shaking her head and looking very unhappy. A man in a military jacket was also watching with a frown on his face. Marcus did not notice these people. He only saw the ones who were laughing and cheering. He felt like he was the most popular person in the world. His phone battery was getting low, but he did not want to stop recording. He decided to make one final joke that would be the best part of his whole show. Marcus looked directly at the guard and started talking in his fake British accent again. "I wonder if this soldier boy here has ever been in a real fight," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "He looks like he probably runs away when he sees a mouse." The crowd laughed even louder at this joke. But as soon as Marcus said these words, something changed. The air around them felt different. Even though the guard had not moved at all, Marcus suddenly felt like he had crossed a line that should never be crossed. The feeling was so strong that Marcus stopped talking for a moment. His smile began to fade as he looked into the guard's eyes again. This time, what he saw there was not his imagination. What happened next made Marcus' blood turn cold. The royal guard did something that Marcus thought was impossible. Without moving his body even 1 inch and without changing the expression on his face, the guard spoke. His voice was so quiet that only Marcus could hear it. The words came out between his teeth in a whisper that sounded like wind blowing through a graveyard. "You have 30 seconds to walk away, or you will discover why we are called guards." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He looked at the guard's face, but nothing had changed. The guard was still looking straight ahead. His mouth had barely moved when he spoke. If Marcus had not been standing so close, he would never have heard the words. Marcus looked around at the crowd to see if anyone else had heard what the guard said, but everyone was still laughing and taking pictures. They had no idea that anything had happened. Some people were still encouraging Marcus to do more funny things. Marcus tried to convince himself that he had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he was just tired from walking around London all morning. Maybe the excitement of having so many people watch his video was making him hear things that were not real. But then the guard's voice came again. This time, the whisper was even quieter and more frightening. 25 seconds. Marcus' hands started shaking. He almost dropped his phone. This was definitely not his imagination. The guard was actually talking to him and counting down, but counting down to what Marcus did not want to find out. He tried to laugh and make another joke, but his voice cracked when he spoke. The sound that came out of his mouth was high and nervous. Some people in the crowd started to notice that something was wrong with Marcus. Sarah moved closer to him. "Marcus, what is happening?" she asked quietly. "You look like you have seen a ghost." Marcus could not answer her. He was too busy staring at the guard and waiting for the next whispered warning. He did not have to wait long. 20 seconds. The guard's voice was getting colder with each countdown. Marcus began to notice things about the guard that he had missed before. Even though the man was standing perfectly still, Marcus could see the muscles in his arms and shoulders. This was not someone who spent his days just standing around looking pretty for tourists. Marcus also noticed the guard's hands. They were holding the big black gun with perfect control. The hands looked strong, and there were small scars on the knuckles. These were the hands of someone who had used them for fighting. 15 seconds. Marcus started to panic. He looked toward the palace gates and saw other royal guards standing at different positions. Were they all watching him now? Marcus could not tell for sure, but he felt like many eyes were suddenly focused on him. The crowd was still making noise and taking pictures, but Marcus could no longer hear them clearly. All he could focus on was the guard's voice and the countdown that was getting closer and closer to 0. Marcus tried to step backward, but his legs felt weak. He wanted to run, but he could not move. It was like he was frozen in place by fear. 10 seconds. Marcus finally understood that he had made a terrible mistake. This was not a game or a joke. The Royal Guard was not just a tourist attraction or a man in a costume. This was a real soldier who was giving Marcus a real warning. Sarah grabbed Marcus' arm. "We need to leave right now," she said with worry in her voice. "Something is very wrong here." But Marcus still could not move. He was waiting for the final countdown and wondering what would happen when it reached 0. 5 seconds. The guard's whisper was now so quiet that Marcus had to strain to hear it, but the words hit him like a punch to the stomach. Marcus realized that in just a few more seconds he was going to find out what the guard meant when he said Marcus would discover why they were called guards. Marcus' mind was racing as he stared at the Royal Guard. In those final seconds before the countdown reached 0, Marcus began to see things he had been too foolish to notice before. The guard was young, but his eyes told a different story. These were not the eyes of someone who had lived an easy life. They were the eyes of a person who had seen terrible things and survived them. Marcus could see tiny lines around the corners that came from squinting in bright desert sun or staying awake for days during dangerous missions. The guard's posture was perfect, not because someone had taught him to stand straight for tourists. His back was straight, and his shoulders were square because years of military training had made it impossible for him to stand any other way. This was a man who had been shaped by discipline and danger. Marcus looked at the guard's uniform more carefully. The bright red jacket and shiny buttons that Marcus had thought looked funny were actually symbols of honor and tradition. The Royal Guards were not playing dress-up. They were carrying on a legacy that went back hundreds of years. 3 seconds. The whispered countdown continued, and Marcus felt like he was about to faint. But something else was happening around him. The crowd that had been laughing and cheering was starting to change. People were beginning to notice that Marcus had stopped being funny. His face was white with fear, and his hands were shaking. Some tourists started to look confused. Others began to step away from Marcus, like they did not want to be near him anymore. Sarah was pulling on Marcus' arm harder now. "Marcus, we have to go," she said loudly enough for people around them to hear. "This is not a joke anymore." But Marcus was frozen in place. He could not stop looking at the guard and thinking about all the ways he had been stupid and disrespectful. He had called this man a toy soldier and a fake person. He had made fun of the guard's job and his country. He had treated a real soldier like he was nothing more than entertainment. 2 seconds. Marcus began to understand what kind of man he was dealing with. This guard had probably been chosen for this job because he was one of the best soldiers in the British Army. Marcus had read somewhere that Royal Guards were not just picked because they looked good in uniforms. They were selected because they had proven themselves in real battles and dangerous situations. The guard might have fought in wars that Marcus could not even imagine. He might have saved lives and risked his own life for his country. And here was Marcus making jokes about him and treating him like a circus performer. 1 second. Marcus finally found the strength to move. He took a big step backward and bumped into Sarah. His phone was still recording, but he had forgotten all about his live stream and his followers. All he could think about was getting away from the guard before the countdown reached 0. But as Marcus stepped back, he realized something that made his fear even worse. The guard had not been making empty threats. Marcus could see it in the way other guards around the palace had shifted their positions. They were all aware of what was happening, and they were ready to act if needed. These men were not just for show. They were real protectors who would defend the palace and everything it represented. If Marcus had pushed them too far, they would have stopped him, and it would not have been gentle or polite. 0. The final number came in the same cold whisper, but something unexpected happened. Instead of whatever, Marcus had been afraid of, the guards simply looked at him for one brief moment. Their eyes met directly for the first time. In that look, Marcus saw disappointment rather than anger. The guard was not furious with Marcus. He was sad that another tourist had failed to understand the meaning and honor behind the uniform. Marcus felt shame wash over him like cold water. This was so much worse than being arrested or yelled at. The guard had given Marcus a chance to learn and grow, but Marcus had wasted it by being foolish and disrespectful. As Marcus stood there feeling ashamed and confused, an elderly British woman pushed through the crowd. She was probably in her 70s with silver hair and a long wool coat. Her face showed the kind of anger that comes from watching something truly wrong happen. She walked right up to Marcus and spoke in a voice that was loud enough for everyone around them to hear clearly. "Young man, what you are doing is disgraceful. These guards are real soldiers who have served our country with honor and courage. They are not here for your entertainment or your social media videos." Her words hit Marcus like a slap across the face. But what made it worse was that she was absolutely right. Marcus had been so focused on getting likes and views that he had forgotten these were real people with real jobs and real feelings. The woman's voice got louder and more firm as she continued speaking. "Some of these men have fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. They have risked their lives to protect freedom and democracy. And you stand here making fun of them like they are clowns in a circus." The crowd around Marcus began to change completely. The people who had been laughing and encouraging him just minutes before were now looking at him with different eyes. Parents pulled their children closer and started walking away. Teenagers stopped taking videos and put their phones down. Marcus could hear people whispering to each other in voices full of disapproval. "Look at that American making a fool of himself," said one person. "He has no respect for our traditions," said another. Someone else muttered that tourists like Marcus gave all Americans a bad reputation. Sarah was standing next to Marcus with her face red from embarrassment. She had been trying to stop him from the beginning, but now she looked like she wanted to disappear completely. "Marcus, I told you this was a bad idea," she whispered. "Now look what has happened." The elderly woman was not finished with her speech. She pointed her finger at Marcus and continued talking. "You come to our country as a guest, and this is how you behave. You mock our history and our heroes for the entertainment of strangers on the internet. You should be ashamed of yourself." More people in the crowd started nodding their heads in agreement with the woman. A man with a thick London accent spoke up from the back. "She is right, mate. You have crossed the line here. These guards deserve better treatment than this." Marcus tried to defend himself, but his voice came out weak and shaky. "I was just having fun," he said quietly. "I did not mean any harm by it. I was just trying to make people laugh." But his excuse only made things worse. The elderly woman shook her head with disgust. "Having fun," she repeated. "Making people laugh. You think disrespecting brave soldiers is funny. You think our traditions and our history are just jokes for your amusement." A younger woman in the crowd spoke up next. "I am a teacher and I bring school children here to learn about our history and culture. How am I supposed to explain to them why a grown man thinks it is acceptable to behave this way?" Marcus looked around and realized that everyone was now against him. The same people who had been taking pictures and laughing were now looking at him like he was something disgusting they had found on the bottom of their shoes. His phone was still recording everything, and Marcus suddenly remembered that hundreds of people were watching this happen live on his social media. But now, instead of getting positive comments, he was probably getting messages telling him how wrong and stupid he was being. Marcus wanted to run away, but his legs still felt weak. He also knew that running would only make him look more guilty and cowardly. He had created this situation, and now he had to face the consequences. The elderly woman took a step closer to Marcus and spoke in a quieter voice that was somehow more frightening than when she had been yelling. "You have embarrassed yourself, your girlfriend, and your entire country today. The least you can do now is apologize properly and learn from this mistake." Marcus knew she was right, but saying sorry felt impossible. His pride was fighting against his shame and fear. He had never been in a situation like this before where so many people were angry with him at the same time. An older gentleman wearing a military jacket with medals on the chest stepped forward from the crowd. He looked to be in his 60s with gray hair and a serious expression. The medals on his jacket showed that he had served in the British military for many years. The man walked up to Marcus and began speaking in a calm but firm voice. His words were not angry like the elderly woman's had been, but they carried even more weight because he spoke from experience. "Son, I think you need to understand something important about these guards. They are not actors or performers hired to entertain tourists. Every single one of these men is a real soldier who has earned the right to wear this uniform through years of dedicated service." Marcus looked at the man and could see the authority in his eyes. This was someone who knew what he was talking about when it came to military service and honor. The man continued his explanation while pointing toward the royal guard, who had whispered the warning to Marcus. "That young man you were making fun of has probably seen more combat and faced more danger than most people will experience in their entire lives. The selection process to become a royal guard is extremely difficult and competitive." Other people in the crowd moved closer to listen to what the veteran was saying. Even tourists who did not speak English well seemed to understand that something important was being explained. These guards are chosen from the best soldiers in regiments that have fought in some of the most dangerous places in the world: Afghanistan, Iraq, Northern Ireland, the Falklands. They have served in desert heat and mountain cold. They have protected their fellow soldiers and completed missions that most people could never imagine. Marcus felt his stomach twist as he began to understand the full weight of his actions. He had not just made fun of a man in a costume. He had disrespected a war veteran who had risked his life in service to his country. The older man was not finished with his lesson. "The uniform you see as funny or strange represents hundreds of years of British military tradition. The red coat has been worn by soldiers who fought in wars that shaped the modern world. The bearskin hat is not just for show, it is a symbol of courage and honor earned on battlefields." A woman in the crowd asked a question that Marcus had been wondering about. If they are real soldiers, why do they just stand there and let people take pictures? Why do they not react when tourists bother them? The veteran smiled slightly and answered her question. "That is exactly what makes them so special. It takes incredible discipline and self-control to stand perfectly still for hours while people make noise and take pictures all around you. It takes even more strength to stay calm and professional when someone is being disrespectful." He looked directly at Marcus as he continued. "The fact that this guard gave you a warning instead of having you removed immediately shows remarkable restraint and patience. In many countries, if you behave this way toward a soldier, there would be serious consequences." Marcus thought about what would happen if someone went to Arlington National Cemetery in America and made fun of the guards there, or if they tried to mock soldiers at any military base. The idea made him feel sick. The older man seemed to read Marcus' thoughts. "You are American, yes. How would you feel if a foreign tourist came to your country and made jokes about your soldiers who died fighting for freedom? How would you react if someone mocked the guards at the tomb of the unknown soldier?" Marcus had visited Arlington Cemetery with his family when he was younger. He remembered how quiet and respectful everyone had been there. The idea of someone making jokes in that sacred place made him angry just thinking about it. Now Marcus began to understand that he had done the exact same thing here in London. He had treated a place of honor and tradition like it was his personal playground. He had shown disrespect not just to one guard, but to everyone who had ever worn the uniform and served their country. The veteran stepped closer to Marcus and spoke in a voice that was quiet but powerful. "These men stand here in all kinds of weather, protecting something bigger than themselves. They represent the best of what it means to serve others before yourself. You owe them better than what you have shown today." Marcus stood in the middle of the crowd, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. The weight of his actions, and the words of the elderly woman and the veteran, had finally broken through his pride and ignorance. He knew what he had to do, even though it was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the royal guard. His hands were still shaking, and his voice was not steady, but he knew he could not wait any longer to make things right. Marcus cleared his throat and began to speak in a voice that was loud enough for everyone in the crowd to hear clearly. He wanted to make sure that his apology was as public as his disrespect had been. "I want to apologize to this guard and to everyone here today. I have been ignorant and disrespectful, and I am deeply sorry for my behavior." The crowd became quiet as they listened to what Marcus was saying. Even people who had been walking by stopped to hear his words. Marcus continued speaking, and his voice became stronger as he went on. "I came here today thinking that this was all just for show and entertainment. I thought these guards were just actors in costumes put here for tourists like me to take pictures with. I was completely wrong." He looked directly at the guard as he spoke the next part. "Sir, I now understand that you are a real soldier who has served your country with honor and courage. I made fun of your uniform and your duty, and that was inexcusable. You deserve respect, not mockery, from visitors to your country." Marcus turned to address the crowd that had gathered around him. "I also want to apologize to all of you for my behavior. I represented my country poorly today, and I embarrassed myself and my girlfriend. Americans are not all like this, and I hope you will not judge all of us based on my stupid actions." The elderly woman who had first spoken up against Marcus looked surprised by his words. She had expected him to make excuses or try to defend himself. Instead, he was taking full responsibility for what he had done. Marcus was not finished with his apology. He had more to say, and he wanted to make sure he said it all. "I learned today that these guards are chosen from the best soldiers in the British Army. They have served in dangerous places and risked their lives to protect others. What I did was not just rude, it was insulting to everyone who has ever worn a military uniform." Sarah moved closer to Marcus and put her hand on his arm. She was proud of him for doing the right thing, even though it was difficult and embarrassing. Marcus looked back at the royal guard one more time. "I hope you can forgive me for my disrespect. I promise that I will remember this lesson for the rest of my life. You and all the guards here deserve to be honored, not mocked." The guard remained perfectly still during the entire apology. His face showed no expression, and he continued to look straight ahead. But Marcus thought he saw something different in the guard's eyes now. The coldness and warning were gone, and had been replaced by something that might have been understanding. The crowd around Marcus began to change again. The anger and disapproval that had been directed at him started to soften. People could see that his apology was genuine, and that he had truly learned from his mistake. The veteran who had explained the history of the guard stepped forward and put his hand on Marcus' shoulder. "That was the right thing to do, son. It takes courage to admit when you are wrong and apologize in front of so many people." The elderly woman also nodded with approval. "You have shown that you can learn and grow from your mistakes. That is more than many people can do." Marcus felt a mixture of relief and continued shame. He was glad that he had apologized, but he still felt terrible about what he had done. The apology was just the first step in making things right. He realized that this experience had changed him in a way that would last forever. He would never again treat other people's traditions and service with such casual disrespect. He had learned that being a good tourist meant being a respectful guest in other people's countries and cultures. As the crowd began to break up and people started to walk away, Marcus remained standing near the guard for a few more moments. He wanted to show his respect by staying quiet and still, just like the visitors who truly understood the significance of what they were seeing. Marcus was about to walk away from the royal guard when something completely unexpected happened. Just as he turned to leave with Sarah, the guard spoke again. But this time his voice was different from the cold, whispered warning he had given before. The guard's words were still quiet, so that only Marcus could hear them. But now there was no threat or anger in his tone. Instead, there was something that sounded almost like kindness. "Tourist," the guard said without moving his lips or changing his expression. "Thank you for the apology. Most people never learn." Marcus stopped walking immediately. He could not believe what he had just heard. After everything that had happened, the guard was actually thanking him. Marcus turned back to look at the guard, but the man was still staring straight ahead with the same blank expression he had worn the entire time. Marcus wondered if he had imagined the words just like he had first thought about the warning. But he knew he had not imagined anything. The guard had definitely spoken to him, and what he said made Marcus feel something he had not expected. The guard had dealt with disrespectful tourists probably every single day of his duty at Buckingham Palace. People making jokes, taking inappropriate pictures, trying to make him laugh or react. And most of those people probably walked away without ever understanding what they had done wrong. But Marcus had apologized. He had admitted his mistake in front of everyone and shown that he understood the significance of his actions. To the guard, this probably meant more than Marcus could realize. Marcus felt a new kind of emotion wash over him. It was not shame or fear like he had felt before. It was something closer to gratitude mixed with deep respect. The guard could have had Marcus arrested or removed by security. Instead, he had given him a chance to learn and grow. Sarah noticed that Marcus had stopped walking and was staring at the guard again. "Marcus, what is it?" she asked quietly. "Is something wrong?" Marcus shook his head and smiled for the first time since the whole incident had begun. "No, nothing is wrong," he said. "Something is actually very right." He looked at the royal guard one more time and saw him not as a tourist attraction or a man in a funny costume, but as a real person who had a difficult and important job. The guard stood there hour after hour in all kinds of weather, dealing with crowds and noise and disrespect, and he did it with dignity and professionalism. Marcus began to understand that the guard's job was much harder than it looked. It was not just about standing still and looking straight ahead. It was about representing something bigger than yourself. It was about maintaining honor and tradition while dealing with people who did not always understand or respect what you were doing. The guard had probably served in places where his life was in constant danger. He had probably seen friends get hurt or killed. He had probably made sacrifices that Marcus could not even imagine. And now he stood here protecting a symbol of his nation's history, while tourists like Marcus made fun of him. But despite all of this, the guard had shown mercy and patience. He had given Marcus a chance to redeem himself instead of simply having him punished. That took strength and character that Marcus was only beginning to appreciate. Marcus realized that the guard's final words to him were a gift. By saying thank you, the guard had shown that Marcus' apology had meant something. It had shown that even though Marcus had started the day as a foolish, disrespectful tourist, he had ended it as someone who understood the importance of honor and respect. As Marcus and Sarah finally walked away from Buckingham Palace, Marcus kept thinking about what the guard had said. Most people never learn. Those words stayed with him and made him think about all the other tourists who came to London every day. How many of them made the same mistakes Marcus had made? How many of them treated the guards like entertainment instead of real people with real feelings and real service records? And how many of them walked away without ever understanding what they had done wrong? Marcus felt grateful that he had been given the opportunity to learn, even though it had come through embarrassment and shame. The experience had been painful, but it had also been valuable in a way that would stay with him forever. Marcus and Sarah walked away from Buckingham Palace in complete silence. Neither of them spoke for several blocks as they made their way through the busy London streets. Marcus' mind was still processing everything that had happened and how much it had changed him in just one morning. When they finally sat down at a small cafe, Sarah was the first one to speak. "Marcus, I am proud of you for apologizing," she said quietly. "That took real courage, especially with so many people watching." Marcus nodded, but he still felt heavy with the weight of what had happened. "Sarah, I feel like such an idiot," he said. "How could I have been so blind and disrespectful? I treated that guard like he was not even a real person." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "You made a mistake, but you learned from it. That is what matters now. You cannot change what happened, but you can make sure it never happens again." Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at the video he had been recording. The comment section was filled with people telling him how wrong he had been and how embarrassed they were to watch an American behave that way. But there were also some comments from people who said they were proud of him for apologizing. Without hesitation, Marcus deleted the entire video from his social media account. He did not want anyone else to see his shameful behavior, even if some people had liked his apology. The whole thing felt too personal and too important to be used for internet entertainment. Instead, Marcus wrote a long, thoughtful post about what he had learned that day. He wrote about the importance of respecting other people's cultures and traditions when traveling. He wrote about how the royal guards were real soldiers who deserved honor, not mockery. He wrote about how easy it was to forget that the people we see in tourist attractions are real human beings with real feelings. The post got more likes and shares than any video Marcus had ever made. People from all over the world commented to share their own stories about learning to be respectful travelers. Some people thanked Marcus for being honest about his mistake and showing how to make things right. Over the following months, Marcus thought about the Royal Guard almost every day. The guard's whispered warning and his final words of thanks had changed something deep inside Marcus that affected how he saw the world. When Marcus returned to California, he started volunteering at a local veterans center. He wanted to do something to honor the military service members in his own country, the same way he wished he had honored the Guard in London from the beginning. Marcus also became a different kind of traveler. On his next trips to other countries, he researched the history and culture before he arrived. He learned about local customs and traditions so he could show proper respect. He visited museums and historical sites with genuine interest instead of just looking for fun photo opportunities. Most importantly, Marcus learned to see the people he met while traveling as real individuals with their own stories and struggles rather than as entertainment or photo props. He realized that being a good tourist meant being a respectful guest in other people's homes and countries. The experience at Buckingham Palace had taught Marcus that true confidence came from understanding and respecting others, not from making fun of them. He had learned that real courage meant admitting when you were wrong and trying to make things right. Years later, when Marcus told the story to friends and family, he always emphasized the lesson rather than the embarrassment. He wanted other people to learn from his mistake without having to make the same error themselves. Marcus never forgot the Royal Guard's final words to him. Most people never learn. Those words had become a reminder to Marcus that learning and growing from mistakes was a choice that not everyone made. But it was a choice that could change your life if you were brave enough to make it. The guard had given Marcus a gift that day, even though it had not felt like a gift at the time. He had given him the opportunity to become a better person, and Marcus was grateful for it every single day for the rest of his life.